Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The Harry Potter films barely explored the personalities of his parents, James and Lily. We only caught brief glimpses of what the filmmakers considered important: Lily's sacrifice, the tension with Snape. But so much more was left behind the scenes. Those who've read the books know their story is deep, dramatic, and worthy of a film of its own. Today, let's dive into the unknown and forgotten facts about the parents of the boy who lived. Enjoy the video. Number 1. They married right after school. Seventh year at Hogwarts wasn't just about studies for James and Lily. It marked the beginning of true love. After years of rivalry, stubbornness, and misunderstandings, real feelings finally emerged between them. Despite their young age, they quickly made a serious decision. They got married right after graduation. They were only 18 years old, but with the looming war against Voldemort, the future was too uncertain to wait. They lived as if tomorrow might never come. Number 2, they didn't have regular jobs. Young, in love, and financially secure, Lily and James didn't need to take on ordinary jobs. The Potter family had substantial savings at Gringotts left to James by his father. These would later be passed on to Harry. But that doesn't mean they were idle. Lily and James fought bravely as members of the Order of the Phoenix. Fighting evil became their full-time mission, one that came with constant danger. This decision shows they weren't just a young couple in love, but true heroes of their time. Number 3, James and Lily were head boy and head girl. Harry was often compared to his parents, but when it came to academics, he didn't quite live up to them. James and Lily were chosen as head boy and head girl in their final year, a prestigious position granted not just for grades, but for leadership, discipline, and the respect of their teachers. When Hagrid first told Harry about his parents, he called them the best wizards of their time. And that wasn't an exaggeration. Intelligent, respected, and powerful. They were stars at Hogwarts. Sadly, the films barely touched this important side of their story. Number 4, James saved Snape. The relationship between James Potter and Severus Snape was anything but friendly. However, even in that rivalry, there was a moment that revealed James's true character. One day, Sirius Black played a dangerous prank and lured Snape toward the Shrieking Shack, the place where, during every full moon, Remus Lupin transformed into a werewolf. Had Snape gone all the way, he might have been killed. It was James who realized the joke had gone too far and rushed to save Severus. He didn't have to do it. He risked his own life for someone he disliked. This powerful moment never made it into the films, but in the books, it's a key insight into who James really was. Number 5, they had a cat. In a letter to Sirius, Lily mentions not just Harry, but also a family pet, a cat. At one point, little Harry nearly knocked the poor animal over while flying through the house on his toy broomstick. This small detail adds warmth and comfort to their otherwise tragic story. What happened to the cat after Voldemort's attack remains a mystery. Some fans even speculate that the cat survived and later became Crookshanks, Hermione's pet. Sadly, this lovely detail never found a place in the films. Number 6. Their wands revealed a lot about them. A magical wand can reveal a great deal about its owner. Lily Potter's wand was made of willow. Swishy and well-suited for charm work. It was 10¼ inches long. Its core is unknown, but the wand's personality reflects Lily's creative and sensitive mind. James's wand was 11 inches long, made of pliable mahogany, ideal for transfiguration. Fitting since James was an Animagus and could turn into a stag during his school years. These little details remain in the books only, but they add depth to the characters of Harry's parents. Number 7. Lily had the ability to see the good in people. Lily Evans never judged by blood or house. She judged by heart. And in Severus Snape, she saw something no one else wanted to see: kindness buried under anger, brilliance hidden behind bitterness. While others avoided him, Lily sat beside him, shared books, defended him when James and Sirius mocked him in the courtyard. "Leave him alone," she snapped at James once, eyes burning. "He doesn't need you to make his life miserable." No one else dared stand between Gryffindor and Slytherin like that. She held on to that friendship longer than most would have, even when Snape drifted into the dark corners of magic, even when he started speaking the language of Death Eaters. But the moment he called her mudblood, he crossed a line that Lily couldn't forgive. "You've chosen your way," she told him, her voice cold, and she walked away. But it hurt her deeply, because Lily always believed people could change, and losing that hope was a wound no spell could heal. Number 8. James and Lily's wedding was modest but meaningful. Their wedding wasn't grand. It wasn't in the papers. No fireworks, no famous faces, just vows whispered in a quiet grove, surrounded by the people who mattered. James wore a simple black cloak. Lily had flowers braided into her hair. Sirius Black stood by James as best man, grinning like a child who couldn't believe his brother had found something this real. Remus was there too, hands folded, eyes bright. Peter Pettigrew came late, but they didn't mind. They laughed that day. Lily tripped, walking down the aisle, and James caught her without magic. Someone brought butterbeer instead of wine. Dumbledore sent a letter instead of a gift. "May your love be stronger than the darkness around you." The war didn't stop. Death Eaters still hunted, but for that one day, it felt like love was winning. It wasn't about safety, it was about hope. No photos survived, only memories. Sirius once said, that was the last time they were truly happy, before the world caught up. And maybe that's what made their wedding unforgettable. Not the flowers, not the spellwork, but the way they looked at each other as if time had stopped and nothing could touch them. Number 9, James and Lily escaped Voldemort 3 times. James and Lily didn't just hide from Voldemort, they faced him and survived 3 times. That number wasn't random, it was the key to the prophecy. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord, born to those who have thrice defied him. Those weren't just words, they were scars. Each escape marked Voldemort's pride. And each time the Potters lived, his obsession with them grew. One duel happened in the outskirts of Cokeworth. James barely made it out alive after shielding Lily from a Cruciatus curse. Another time, they interrupted a Death Eater ritual meant to summon reinforcements from Albania. The third was the most infamous, when Voldemort personally stormed a safe house, and Lily's defensive charm held long enough for the Order to arrive. 3 battles, 3 escapes, and 1 furious Dark Lord. Dumbledore understood what it meant, so did Voldemort. The Potters weren't just defying him, they were denying his vision of control, and in doing so they sealed their fate. Voldemort chose their child not just because of a prophecy, but because he wanted revenge. He wanted fear. But he underestimated one thing: love, stubborn and burning, survives even the 3rd time. Number 10, Lily and James were among the first members of the Order of the Phoenix. Before they were parents, James and Lily were soldiers. Not in armor, not with swords, but in robes, wands in hand, standing against the darkest wizard of their age. They joined the Order of the Phoenix straight out of school. Albus Dumbledore himself trusted them. They fought beside Alastor Moody, Alice and Frank Longbottom, and Emmeline Vance. They weren't protected by age or status. They were 20-year-olds facing murderers, facing death. Lily specialized in protective spells. She could throw up shields strong enough to stop curses that shattered stone. James was quicker with a wand than most auras. They worked together, fast and fearless. They were marked for death the moment they defied him 3 times, Dumbledore said quietly. They knew it, and they still chose to fight. While others fled, they stayed. While others made excuses, they made a stand. There was a night in 1980 when the Potters and the Longbottoms ambushed a Death Eater safe house. The attack was fast, chaotic. James disarmed 2 men at once. Lily stunned the 3rd before he reached his wand. They didn't wait for glory. They didn't ask for medals. They left before the Ministry arrived. Silent, invisible, a pair of ghosts fighting to keep the world from falling apart. In the books, their names are spoken with reverence, not just as Harry's parents, but as heroes, real heroes, the kind who knew they wouldn't survive, but fought anyway. When the Order remembered its fallen, their names were always first. James and Lily Potter, young, brilliant, brave, and gone too soon. Number 11. James had the invisibility cloak long before Harry. Long before Harry ever draped it over his shoulders, the invisibility cloak belonged to James Potter. It wasn't just a clever schoolboy's toy, it was a legendary heirloom. Passed down through the Potter line for generations, the cloak had a power unlike any other. It didn't wear with time, it didn't fray, it was perfect. And James used it well. Late nights sneaking into the kitchens, secret meetings with Sirius, dodging Filch and, more often, tormenting Severus Snape from the shadows. James loved the thrill of mischief, and the cloak made it effortless. One night, according to Sirius, he and James crept into the Slytherin common room just to leave a howler disguised as a singing Valentine. Another time, they smuggled a crate of dung bombs into the library, and no one ever knew how. "He always had that damn cloak," Snape once spat, strutting around thinking he was untouchable. But it wasn't about arrogance, it was about freedom, about bending the rules to make room for joy. Dumbledore knew, he'd always known. In the Philosopher's Stone, when Harry receives the cloak with a note that reads, "Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. It's not just a gift, it's a bridge between father and son, between mischief and destiny." James had used it to explore. Harry would use it to survive. The cloak, like James himself, walked the line between light and shadow. It hid things, yes, but it also revealed truth. James may have used it to dodge rules, but Harry would one day use it to walk into death itself. And somewhere, in that ancient fabric, a trace of James remained, laughing softly, running through halls, unseen, unforgotten. Number 12. James was an Animagus in secret from the teachers. James Potter became an Animagus before he even graduated Hogwarts, and no teacher ever knew. It was one of the Marauders' greatest secrets. He, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew spent 3 years mastering the impossible. They did it in secret, breaking rules and risking everything, just to be there for their friend. Because Remus Lupin once a month turned into something dangerous, something no one could face alone, a werewolf. James didn't hesitate. He chose to become a stag, noble, fast, powerful. They called him Prongs. At night, when the full moon rose, he would gallop through the forbidden forest, hooves pounding the earth beside a black dog and a rat. In the center of it all was Moony, lost in the beast, but he wasn't alone. "They did something for me that no one else would have done," Lupin later said. "They became animagi to keep me company. It was a dangerous thing to do." Becoming an animagus required perfect control. A single mistake and the transformation could turn deadly. Adult wizards were required to register with the Ministry of Magic, and most never dared attempt it. But James and his friends did it as teenagers, quietly, brilliantly, without guidance. They mapped the transformation themselves, tested it in silence, and succeeded where grown wizards failed. James wasn't just a prankster or a show-off like Snape always claimed. He was brave in ways that went far beyond Gryffindor daring. Turning into a stag wasn't about glory, it was about loyalty, about love. He knew what it meant to be a true friend. And in the moonlit shadows of the forest with danger all around, Prongs stood tall, protecting the boy behind the monster. Number 13, Lily was a natural-born witch despite her muggle-born status. Lily Evans was born to non-magical parents, but her magic was never in question. From the moment Severus Snape first saw her as a child, twirling in the air after leaping from a swing without falling, he knew she was different. "You're a witch," he told her, wide-eyed. She didn't believe him at first, but soon flowers bloomed in her hands when she touched them, and toys moved across the floor without her lifting a finger. Even before Hogwarts, Lily's magic was wild, instinctive, and impossibly precise. At school, she quickly became one of Professor Slughorn's favourite students. He called her one of the brightest I've ever taught, placing her in his exclusive slug club by her second year. She brewed complex potions that older students struggled with, and her charm work was so elegant that even Professor Flitwick clapped at her technique. When other students faltered, Lily thrived. Her wand seemed like an extension of her hand, and spells obeyed her with quiet grace. Her friendship with Severus in their early years only made her stronger. Snape, who excelled at the dark arts, was constantly surprised by Lily's intuition with magic she had never seen before. She could cast a shield charm by instinct and once repaired a shattered window using a spell she hadn't even been taught. Even he admitted it. "You're better than half the class already, and it's only been a month." The fact that she was Muggle-born didn't matter, not to her professors, not to her peers, only to those like Bellatrix Lestrange and the pure-blood fanatics who whispered behind her back. But Lily stood tall. She was proof that magic isn't about blood, it's about heart, talent, and the will to learn. Her brilliance wasn't inherited, it burned from within. Number 14. James left behind a wealthy inheritance. Harry Potter never worried about money, not once. Not even when he discovered he was the sole survivor of a magical genocide, not even when he arrived in a world entirely alien to his own. This fact, quietly present but never explicitly addressed in the films, hides a story of silent wealth, of a quiet fortune passed down through a forgotten lineage. In the films, we watch as Harry opens a vault brimming with gold, but we are never told why it's full. The answer lies not in Dumbledore's benevolence, nor in any ministry trust fund. It lies with James Potter, and beyond James with the strange golden past of the Potter family itself. Long before James and Lily Potter ever dreamed of a child, and long before Voldemort etched their names into the grim ledger of the dead, the Potters were already legends, though not in the way you might expect. Their fame wasn't built on prophecy or war or wands at dawn. It was built on alchemy, entrepreneurship, and the strangely whimsical world of magical hair care. For the truth is this: James Potter inherited a vast fortune, and that fortune came from a product that every witch and wizard in Britain had used at some point: Sleekeasy's hair potion. It was James's father, Fleamont Potter, who revolutionized the wizarding toiletry industry. Born at the tail end of the 19th century, Fleamont was not a man content with simply inheriting wealth. He was determined to expand it. He quadrupled the family gold by inventing Sleekeasy's hair potion. We are told in Pottermore, a silky concoction that tamed even the most rebellious of hair. A potion so effective that it became a staple in every respectable wizarding household, and a small miracle in a bottle. Fleamont sold the company for a hefty profit shortly before his death, and the entire fortune passed on to James. This wealth wasn't accumulated overnight, nor did it vanish upon James's death. When he and Lily were killed in Godric's Hollow, the family fortune, now encompassing generations of accrued gold, was automatically transferred to their only son. Harry became a millionaire before he turned 1. But none of this made it into the movies. On screen, we are given glimpses: the mounds of gold in Gringotts, the fact that the Weasleys refused to let Harry pay for anything. But the films never say why he's rich. The omission is curious because it quietly erases a key element of Harry's world, that he is not just the boy who lived, but the boy who inherited. When Harry visits Gringotts for the first time, the book does not shy away from emphasizing his shock. Harry gasped. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze nuts. Sorcerer's Stone, Chapter 5. This is not a modest trust fund, this is generational wealth, the kind that could fund a small school or buy an estate in Wiltshire, and yet we never hear of it again, not in terms of management, taxation, or even curiosity. There are no financial anxieties in Harry's life because there never needed to be. The wealth of the Potters also carried a quiet prestige. They were not nouveau riche. The Potter name stretched back centuries, possibly to Linfred of Stinchcombe, a 12th century wizard and the originator of the family's fortune. Linfred was a gentle, eccentric man known in his village as the Potterer, a nickname that would eventually become a surname. He created healing draughts and potions that laid the foundation for modern magical medicine, including the beginnings of the pepper-up potion. His reputation and inventions earned him modest wealth which passed on through the generations. But it was Fleamont who turned that modest wealth into true opulence. Though mocked for his unusual name, a family tradition of quirky monikers, Fleamont graduated from Hogwarts with ambitions that extended far beyond ministry work. He spent years perfecting Sleekeazy's formula, brewing it in copper cauldrons with secret herbs and a touch of unicorn hair. Once released to the market, it became a sensation. Witches who had fought with hair charms and tangling hexes rejoiced. Even Hermione Granger, decades later, used the potion to tame her unruly mane for the Yule Ball. James grew up in luxury, but he was never spoiled by it. Raised as the only child of older parents, he received not only their fortune, but their full attention. The Potters were private, almost reclusive, by the time James was born. They lived in comfort and elegance, their manor house hidden under enchantments in the countryside, far from the politics of the ministry. And they had time, so much time, for James. That love, more than their wealth, defined his character. When James married Lily, the union brought together two worlds, the ancient magical nobility of the Potters and the bright, raw brilliance of the Muggle-born Evans family. Lily didn't marry into money, she married into legacy. And although they chose to live modestly in Godric's Hollow, James could have bought them any estate in Britain. He chose simplicity, perhaps in defiance of the privilege he was born into. But even that modest house was secured by old gold and quiet wealth. None of this made it to the big screen. The films often focused on Harry's struggle, not his safety. His vault is shown but not explained, his comfort taken for granted, and yet this financial security allowed him something rare in the wizarding world: freedom. He never had to work summers, he never needed to borrow. He bought his wand without blinking and gifted the Weasley twins a fortune to start their joke shop. As Rowling wrote, Harry had inherited the fortune of the Potters and the gold left to him in Dumbledore's will. But even before Dumbledore, Harry was set for life. Number 15, Lily was highly skilled in potion-making, one of the most compelling qualities of Lily Evans Potter, a fact buried deep within the pages of J.K. Rowling's novels and yet curiously absent from the films, is her extraordinary talent for potions. While the cinematic portrayal of Lily mostly centers on her as a loving mother, a tragic figure, and a childhood friend of Severus Snape, the books offer a glimpse of a far more complex and intellectually formidable witch. Lily's mastery of potions was not a mere academic achievement. It was a bridge between worlds, a thread of brilliance that even Severus Snape, the future potions master himself, silently revered. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, there's a scene that might pass unnoticed by a casual reader, yet it contains a deeply revealing detail. Horace Slughorn, the longtime potions professor at Hogwarts, mentions Lily during a Slug Club meeting with unmistakable admiration. "One of the brightest I ever taught. Vivacious, you know, charming girl. I used to tell her she should have been in my house. Very gifted at potions, Lily was." The fact that a Slytherin head of house would say this about a Gryffindor speaks volumes. Slughorn did not give compliments lightly. His words serve as a forgotten testament to her magical finesse. Lily's aptitude in potions was particularly remarkable considering the difficulty of the subject. Potions required precision, intuition, a subtle understanding of magical reactions, and the patience to observe results that might not be immediate. Many students, even talented ones, struggled to make consistent progress. Yet Lily not only succeeded, she thrived. It is worth recalling that potions was one of the very few subjects where even Hermione Granger, with all her academic prowess, sometimes faltered due to the lack of clear, rule-bound logic. In contrast, Lily's excellence in this elusive art came naturally, refined through diligence and perhaps something even deeper, an instinctual harmony with magical chemistry. Her talent was not limited to classroom performance. During her years at Hogwarts, she formed a study bond, if not a full partnership, with Severus Snape, who shared her interest in the subject. While their friendship later collapsed under the weight of ideology and choice, its origins were grounded in shared curiosity and mutual respect. According to snippets scattered through the Prince's Tale chapter in Deathly Hallows, young Severus and Lily spent hours discussing spells and theories. Although Snape would later become the half-blood prince and create his own notations in his potions textbook, it is quietly suggested that some of his earliest improvements may have been inspired or challenged by Lily's observations. Rowling does not hand us this information with bold underlines or flashing signs, but we learn through context that Lily, while never as obsessive as Snape, was just as innovative in her own way. During one memory in Deathly Hallows, Snape watches Lily practicing magic with a kind of reverence. She was not simply repeating incantations or stirring cauldrons from rote memory. She was experimenting, questioning, adjusting. It's a kind of magic that only the truly gifted dare attempt. That her work stood out to someone as fiercely judgmental as Snape is no small detail. It suggests not only technical skill but creative intelligence. Their friendship, fragile and complicated, had a core forged in magical understanding. It's not a stretch to imagine them sitting side by side beneath a beech tree near the lake, discussing the nuances of powdered root of asphodel or the properties of essence of dittany. The books never describe these moments explicitly, but their familiarity and shared language in later scenes imply a history of deep academic interaction. When Snape later becomes the potions master, he never speaks ill of Lily's abilities, even as he shows contempt for other Gryffindors. That silence is a kind of monument. What makes this forgotten detail so significant is its implication for Lily's legacy. The films often depict her as a passive figure, someone whose primary role was dying for her son. But the Lily of the books was a magical force of her own. She was a prefect. She stood up to injustice, and she possessed one of the most difficult magical talents to master. That the story doesn't dwell on this is a quiet tragedy. Her son Harry, for example, would have benefited from knowing this part of her. He struggles through potions under Snape's harsh instruction, never suspecting that the very woman he idealizes once walked the same dungeons with calm authority and grace. It is especially moving when Slughorn recounts that Lily could have made a fine, professional potion maker. She had a knack for it, he says in his grief-tinged memory, adding, a natural. Coming from Slughorn, a man obsessed with talent and pedigree, this statement is not mere nostalgia. It is an assessment of true skill. Slughorn's fondness for Lily was not only personal, but academic. He recognized in her something rare, a gift that could have rewritten the landscape of magical medicine or alchemy had she lived. There is an untold story in Lily's contribution to the magical community, a story that ended too soon. The skills she cultivated were not just for academic accolades, they had the potential for real-world application. Imagine what cures she might have developed, what elixirs she might have perfected, had her life not been cut short at the age of 21. Her legacy could have rivaled that of any celebrated potion maker in history, perhaps even eclipsing them. That potential, forever frozen in time, remains one of the most quietly devastating losses in the series. Perhaps this is why Snape, even in his darkest moments, never attempts to claim superiority over Lily's talents. He may scorn others, but he remembers her with a mixture of pain and awe. In his most vulnerable memory, when he finds her murdered, his grief is not only personal, it is also the grief of a scholar who has seen a peer silenced too early. Lily's wand, her cauldron, her parchment, all of it would have been filled with unspoken possibilities. Snape, who could see genius when others saw only light-hearted charm, knew what was lost. Number 17, Lily knew how to forgive, but not betrayal. Of all the elements the Harry Potter films chose to omit, one of the most striking is this. Lily Evans Potter could forgive nearly anything, except betrayal. Her story is often told in fragments, scattered across memories, conversations, and recollections, but there lies in it a powerful moral that deserved to be fully shown on screen. Lily's life, short and tragic, was illuminated by the strength of her values. Among those, the one that shone brightest was her unshakable commitment to what was right, even when it meant cutting ties with those she once loved. Severus Snape and Lily Evans had a friendship that bloomed not out of convenience or circumstance, but from a genuine bond. They met as children, long before Hogwarts shaped their paths, when they were simply two misfits trying to understand the world and their place in it. Snape introduced Lily to magic. Lily in turn gave Snape the comfort of acceptance. He was poor, isolated and neglected. She was curious, warm and bright. For years they grew together in the shadow of a world that would later demand they stand on opposing sides. The Hogwarts years should have cemented their friendship, but they instead tested it. Lily was sorted into Gryffindor, Snape into Slytherin. This division, though physical, was not enough to sever their closeness. They remained friends even as Snape fell in with darker company, Avery, Mulciber and others, who would later become Death Eaters. Lily voiced her concerns. She asked him to distance himself from those boys, but Snape, hungry for belonging, refused. The warning signs were there, and yet Lily stayed. She saw the good in him, even when others didn't. But a heart, even as kind as Lily's, can only bear so much. Everything came to a breaking point during their 5th year. It happened after one of James Potter's infamous pranks, a moment that fans of the films remember vividly. Snape, humiliated, lashed out. And in his fury, he said the word that ended everything. "I don't need help from filthy little mudbloods like her." That single sentence, spoken in a moment of rage, shattered the years they had spent together. The word mudblood was more than a slur. It was a curse, a dagger straight to the core of who Lily was. And worse still, it wasn't spoken by a stranger. It came from someone she had defended, someone she had loved as a friend, someone who knew how deeply such a word would wound her. The betrayal wasn't only in the insult, it was in what it revealed. Snape, whether consciously or not, had aligned himself with a belief system that saw her as lesser. And in that moment he chose his pride and his dark ambitions over the one person who had stood by him. From that day forward, Lily severed their friendship. She didn't do it with vengeance or malice. She did it with sorrow, and in doing so she demonstrated a rare and powerful kind of strength. Forgiveness she believed in. Compassion she lived by. But betrayal was a different matter. She could not and would not tolerate loyalty to those who stood with Lord Voldemort. This wasn't a childish spat. It was a reckoning. Snape would later beg for her forgiveness. He apologized. He insisted he hadn't meant it. And it's clear from every word he said in later years that he never stopped regretting that moment. "You disgust me," she told him in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows as recalled by Snape's own memories. "You've chosen your way, I've chosen mine." Her voice was not angry, it was final. Lily didn't hate Snape, she simply no longer trusted him, and she would not stay near someone who clung to the very ideologies that endangered her and others like her. This detail matters because it shows us who Lily really was. She wasn't just a mother whose love saved Harry. She wasn't just a pretty girl James Potter pursued. She was a young woman who made firm moral choices even when they hurt. In cutting off Snape, she proved that love without boundaries is not love at all. Her kindness had depth, but it was not limitless. Her mercy had edges. It's easy to romanticize Snape's pain. The films do this often. They portray his love for Lily as tragic, almost noble, but they rarely ask whether Lily herself would have accepted the man Snape became. The truth laid bare in the books is that she wouldn't have. She didn't. She refused to pretend that old friendship could excuse new loyalties. Even love must draw a line. And Lily's line was clear. Her decision also stands in stark contrast to others around her. James, for all his flaws, changed. He matured. He stepped away from petty cruelty and embraced the cause against Voldemort. Snape, on the other hand, lingered in shadows. He made excuses. He tried to have both, the approval of his dark friends and the loyalty of Lily. But she saw through it. She knew that to stay close to someone who danced with darkness was to allow that darkness into her life. This is why her story is so vital and so overlooked. She wasn't merely reacting to an insult. She was rejecting a path. She was choosing the kind of world she wanted to fight for. Lily didn't just die protecting Harry. She lived defending everything that gave his life meaning: love, justice, integrity. And this choice to cut off Snape was one of the clearest reflections of those values. What makes this story even more powerful is the restraint with which Lily handled the situation. She didn't spread rumors. She didn't seek revenge. She didn't ask others to pick sides. She simply walked away. And by doing so, she sent a louder message than any confrontation could. There is a line, and when it is crossed, consequences follow. Number 18. James Potter trusted Sirius Black until the very end. Of all the painful tragedies surrounding the fall of the Potters, one detail often escapes the silver screen's retelling. James Potter trusted Sirius Black with his life, literally and absolutely. This detail, crucial to understanding the heartbreak and magnitude of the betrayal that followed, never fully emerges in the Harry Potter films. It is a truth buried in the books, whispered between lines, and felt only when we trace the decisions made in the shadows of Voldemort's rise. James Potter had known Sirius since their first year at Hogwarts. Together, they ruled the school with charm and rebellion, forming two sides of a dazzling coin. James, the charismatic ringleader; Sirius, the daring rebel with fire in his blood. Their friendship ran deep, forged in laughter and battles against darkness. By the time the First Wizarding War was at its height, there was no one James trusted more. When he and Lily went into hiding after Sybil Trelawney's prophecy made their infant son a target of the Dark Lord, there was no hesitation in their hearts about who would protect them. Sirius Black, best friend, godfather, and brother in all but blood, was the obvious choice. It is a fact confirmed in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, where Dumbledore recounts the Potters' decision to use the Fidelius charm. Originally, James and Lily intended for Sirius to be their secret keeper. This ancient charm could hide a person so completely that they would vanish from sight and memory so long as the secret keeper remained loyal. James had no reason to doubt Sirius's loyalty. Their bond had survived teenage mayhem, school detentions, and the growing threat of Voldemort. It seemed only natural. But Sirius, ever the strategist, proposed a different plan. He believed Voldemort would suspect him first. He was too obvious, too close to James. So he suggested they switch roles, let Peter Pettigrew, the quiet, overlooked member of their inner circle, take the responsibility. "I suggested the change," Sirius later tells Harry. "I thought it was the perfect plan. Voldemort would be sure to come after me, or would never dream they'd use a weak, talentless thing like Peter." James, trusting Sirius without hesitation, agreed. It was a quiet act of faith, the kind that doesn't demand attention. There was no confrontation, no suspicion. James believed Sirius was acting in their best interest, and he was. That trust would cost him everything. This single decision, simple, well-meaning, and logical, became the tragic hinge upon which the fate of the Potters turned. Peter Pettigrew, driven by fear and weakness, betrayed them to Voldemort just days later. The Dark Lord entered Godric's Hollow on Halloween night, murdering James and Lily while their infant son watched, helpless, in his crib. Yet what makes this betrayal even more soul-wrenching is the trust that preceded it. The films fail to show the depth of James's conviction. In them, the story feels distant, almost clinical. But in the books, particularly in The Prisoner of Azkaban and The Order of the Phoenix, the emotional weight of that choice is inescapable. Sirius's grief is not just for the loss of his friends, but for the guilt of having handed their lives to a traitor. James's unwavering trust in Sirius is never questioned. He never suspects a hidden motive. He doesn't second-guess the switch. In fact, he doesn't even tell anyone else, Dumbledore included, that Peter has become the secret keeper. That silence was part of the plan. It was meant to protect them. But it also left them isolated, vulnerable to the one person they shouldn't have trusted. This truth is seen in the shattered way Sirius speaks of it years later. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, when the truth is finally revealed to Harry, we see Sirius's torment, his belief in the plan, his faith in Peter, and his devastation at the betrayal all stem from one thing: James's trust in him. "You should have died rather than betray your friends," he spits at Pettigrew. It's not hyperbole, it's a reflection of what James would have done, what Sirius was willing to do. That was the measure of their bond. Lily and James didn't choose Peter because they doubted Sirius. They chose him because they trusted Sirius so much that they believed his plan was flawless. It was not a demotion, not a loss of status, not a crack in friendship. It was the highest form of trust, relinquishing direct control for a strategy that promised deeper safety. But, tragically, it underestimated the rot in Peter Pettigrew's soul. James's faith in Sirius persisted even as the world unravelled. When Voldemort fell and the wizarding world discovered the betrayal, Sirius was hunted as the traitor. The evidence seemed undeniable. He had been their closest friend. He had vanished after the murders. He had been found laughing at the scene of an explosion that killed 12 muggles. Peter had framed him perfectly, and without a trial, Sirius was condemned to Azkaban. Yet the heartbreak lies in this. Had James survived, he would never have believed the lie. His trust in Sirius would have held. James would have defended him, would have seen through Peter's cowardice. The tragedy is not just the loss of life, it's the corruption of memory. Sirius spent 12 years as a prisoner, branded as the betrayer of his best friend, when in truth he had done everything he could to protect him. Even Harry, who never knew his father personally, comes to understand the depth of that bond. Through Lupin, through Dumbledore, through the very weight of Sirius's guilt and devotion, Harry learns that James never wavered in his trust. That kind of loyalty is rare, and its loss leaves a wound that can never fully heal. This is the tragedy the films don't show. They give us the headline, Peter was the secret keeper, but they don't show us the emotional blueprint that led to that decision. They don't show the trust exchanged in quiet glances, in unspoken understanding. They don't show how James, who could be reckless and proud, laid down his life strategy entirely at the feet of his friend, because that's how much Sirius meant to him. This omission robs viewers of the true scale of betrayal. Peter didn't just betray the Potters, he betrayed a friendship so profound it was stronger than blood. He violated a circle of trust that had survived war, loss, and darkness, and he did it while wearing the mask of innocence. When Harry finally learns the truth, it reframes everything. It is not just the story of a boy who survived. It is the story of friends who trusted too deeply, of a family that made the wrong call for the right reasons. The emotional architecture of this trust is complex, built not on naivety, but on love, history, and belief. It is why Sirius's innocence, when revealed, hits like a thunderclap, because beneath it lies the haunting realization. If James could have spoken from beyond the grave, he would have said the same thing Harry does. Sirius was never the traitor. The films touch on this, but fail to drive it home with the raw weight it deserves. The books, in contrast, give us enough pieces to reconstruct the moment. To see James pacing the floor in Godric's Hollow, not in doubt, but in hope. To imagine him telling Lily, "Sirius knows what he's doing, we'll be safe." To understand that when Voldemort broke through their door, James's last thought wasn't fear but shock. Not at death, but at the idea that Sirius's plan had failed, because James never doubted Sirius. And therein lies the heartbreak. He died never knowing that Peter, the quiet shadow in their group, was the one who turned. He died with faith in his best friend intact. That faith, unshaken and full-hearted, is one of the greatest unseen tragedies of the Harry Potter universe. The betrayal of Pettigrew is not merely the revelation of a spy, it is the collapse of a sanctuary. The Marauders had created a brotherhood strong enough to weather almost anything, But even fortresses fall when treachery comes from within, and James Potter, brave and loyal, never prepared for betrayal from someone other than Voldemort himself. This is why Sirius's pain is so profound. He doesn't just mourn Lily and James, he mourns the memory of trust. He mourns the look on James's face, imagined endlessly when the truth would have dawned on him. That moment never came. James died still believing. That belief should have been their salvation. Instead, it became their undoing. And so, buried beneath the epic saga of good versus evil is a smaller, more human story of friendship, loyalty, and blind trust. The films don't show this story. They hint at it, suggest it, but never truly dive into it. But in the pages of the books, in the hearts of readers, James's trust in Sirius remains one of the most heartbreaking truths never spoken aloud. Number 19, Lily wrote letters to Sirius, and one of them survived. It is one of those moments in the Harry Potter series that readers whisper about long after the final chapter closes, a scene that the films never dared to touch, perhaps for fear of breaking the spell too soon. It comes quietly in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, nestled between war, fear, and ancient secrets. A letter, not prophecy, not spellwork, not a duel of wands, but parchment inked by the steady, loving hand of Lily Potter, addressed to Sirius Black, a relic of peace, a forgotten whisper of motherhood, friendship, and love frozen in time. Harry discovers the letter while taking refuge in the ancestral Black home at number 12, Grimmauld Place. The house, once full of rage and decay, now serves as a hiding place for those resisting Voldemort's grip. In this murky refuge, Harry stumbles across a dusty room that had once belonged to Sirius. There, amid the clutter, behind a picture of himself on a flying motorbike, lies a letter. Torn in half, burned on one edge, yet somehow surviving. The handwriting is unmistakable, flowing, rounded, purposeful. A mother's handwriting. Harry picks it up, trembling. The name on it stops him cold. Dear Padfoot. Padfoot, Sirius's affectionate nickname from his Marauder days. Not Sirius, not Mr. Black, but Padfoot. And in that one word, the veil of time dissolves. Harry steps into a world he never truly knew. There's something almost unbearable about the way Lily's letter begins. Thank you, for Harry's birthday present. It was his favourite, by far. It is such a small line, ordinary, domestic, affectionate. But for Harry, who has never received a birthday present from his parents, who has never heard their voices outside of a ghostly echo, it is a revelation. For a brief, shimmering moment, he is the boy with the broomstick. He is the baby laughing as he zooms around the living room. He is the child with two living parents and a godfather who dotes on him. The letter continues, breathing life into the past in a way no portrait or memory ever could. Lily writes, 1-year-old and already zooming around on that toy broomstick, which you bought him, by the way. He nearly killed the cat and smashed a horrible vase Petunia sent me for Christmas. There's a glimmer of humour there, a normal frustration with a sister's awkward gift, a baby's innocent chaos, and the gentle teasing of a friend. It's a moment that does not feel like history. It feels like today, like a breath of air from a different time that somehow still lingers. Lily talks about James, about how he's handling fatherhood, how he's restless from being cooped up. James is getting a bit frustrated, shut up here. He tries not to show it, but I can tell. Also, Dumbledore's still got his invisibility cloak, so no chance of little excursions. In this line, we see not the legendary James Potter, chaser for Gryffindor, nor the rebellious prankster of school days, but a man trying to be a good father in the shadow of war. We see a young couple in hiding, aching to live. We see fear, but also resilience. What makes this moment haunting is not only what is said, but what it implies. The joy in the letter is undercut by unease. Voldemort's name isn't written, but his presence presses against every sentence. Lily mentions Bathilda Bagshot, who lives nearby and offers local gossip. There is suspicion in Lily's tone. She wonders if Bathilda might be a little nosy, perhaps under the influence of others. Matilda drops in most days. She's a fascinating old thing with the most amazing stories about Dumbledore. I'm not sure how much to believe, because it seems incredible that Dumbledore could ever have been friends with Gellert Grindelwald. That single sentence, tucked within a letter about baby laughter and smashed vases, offers a glimpse of the broader world. It tells us that Lily, even in hiding, was curious, thoughtful, and aware. She questions what she hears, she reads between the lines, and she shares these thoughts not with James but with Sirius. Because Sirius is more than a godfather, he's her family too. It's important to pause and absorb what this letter means. In the films, Lily is a symbol, a mother's sacrifice, a red-haired woman standing between her son and death. But in the books, and particularly in this letter, she becomes real. She is a person who writes letters, who worries, who laughs, who holds grudges, who misses her friend and wants him to know what Harry's favourite toy is. The films never gave us this version of Lily. They gave us the echo, the shadow, the halo of her love. But this is her voice. And then just like that, the letter is cut off. The second page is gone, burned, destroyed. We never learn the rest. We do not know what else she shared. We do not hear her sign off. Do not read the closing of her final written words to Sirius. That missing page haunts the reader more than any ghost, because it is a reminder that even in magic, not everything survives. Some things are truly too lost. This one letter, found tucked away in a room of shadows, is the only written trace of Lily's voice that Harry ever holds. It is not a diary like Tom Riddle's, it does not speak back. But in a world where everything else is second-hand memory, this fragment is unfiltered, personal, real. There is no spell to replicate the emotion in Lily's script. No pensieve could recreate it better. It is, in every sense, alive, and yet this moment, this extraordinary scene, is absent from the films. It is not dramatized. It is not even alluded to. Viewers who never read the books will never know the gift Lily gave, not just to Sirius, but to Harry. A living artifact of love, a note from the past to the future, a voice meant for one man, discovered by another. Why was it left out? Perhaps because it is quiet. There are no explosions, no battles, no Horcruxes or Death Eaters, just paper, ink and love. But therein lies its power. It does not need spectacle. It is powerful, precisely because it is ordinary. It is a mother's letter to a friend, that is all, and that is everything. The letter also deepens our understanding of Sirius Black. We often think of Sirius as the rebellious godfather, the wrongly imprisoned man, the fighter. But this letter shows how deeply he was woven into the Potters' lives even before their deaths. He was not merely the man who gave Harry a motorbike. He was Padfoot, beloved, trusted, remembered. Lily took time, even in hiding, to write to him, to thank him, to share her life with him, and Harry, upon reading it, feels that connection pass through generations. There's something especially devastating in the idea that Harry holds this letter in his hands, reading words written to someone who is now dead. The people in the letter are ghosts, but the letter is not. It is solid, tangible, proof. And when he finds it, he does not cry, but the reader does. Rowling never explains how the letter ended up in Sirius's old bedroom. Was it returned after the murders? Was it tucked away by Creature? We do not know, but that mystery only adds to its weight. It was meant for Sirius, but found by Harry years later in the ashes of a world torn apart. The tragedy of Lily's letter is that it captures a moment just before the fall. A sliver of happiness, a family intact, a child adored, a house with smashed vases and meddling neighbours and toy broomsticks, and yet the reader knows the fate that follows. That house is breached, that baby becomes the boy who lived, that friend is wrongly imprisoned, that laughter dies, but still the letter survives. There is poetry in that. Amid war and betrayal, something remains. A mother's words, ink that did not fade. A line of script that tells Harry what no spell could, that he was loved, deeply and completely, in a time before the world broke. And though the films omitted it, the letter is canon. It is real. It is in the book. It is a gift to the reader, just as it was a gift to Sirius. and like all such gifts, it does not age. In a world where so much is forgotten, so many memories altered, so many truths twisted, Lily's letter endures as the single most human document in the entire series. It is not a prophecy, it is not a spell, it is a thank you note, a peek into a life not defined by war, a voice that says, we were here, we lived, we loved, and that, more than any battle, is what Harry fought to protect, not only, but the memory of life, the warmth of a mother's letter, the touch of normalcy in a world of wands. For those who read closely, the letter changes everything. It changes Lily from martyr to mother. It changes Sirius from fugitive to family. It changes Harry from orphan to son. And it reminds us that in the wizarding world, it is not always the most magical objects that carry the most power. Sometimes it is the ones made of paper and ink and love. Number 20, James loved Quidditch and was the team captain. Most fans of Harry Potter know that the boy who lived inherited his father's unruly black hair, his mischievous smile, and an uncanny talent for flying. But few recall, or were ever told, that James Potter wasn't merely a good Quidditch player. He was the captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. This was a role earned not by blood or charm, but by sheer determination, grit, and an innate understanding of the game that set him apart, even among the most gifted flyers at Hogwarts. It's a curious omission. The films, in their sweeping portrayal of magic, war, and adolescence, never once mention that James once led Gryffindor's team through some of its most thrilling seasons. Yet in the pages of Quidditch Through the Ages, and in whispered recollections from those who knew him, James's legacy in the sport is carved into the air itself, left behind in trails of wind and golden glimmers of the snitch he so often caught. James had been flying since he was a child, long before he set foot on the school grounds. Pure blood families often introduced brooms to their children early, but James had a special spark. Euphemia Potter, his mother, once wrote in a letter that James rode his toy broom indoors, knocking over flower vases and picture frames like a little comet with wild hair. The moment he arrived at Hogwarts, he tried out for the Quidditch team and quickly distinguished himself not just as a skilled flyer, but as a natural leader. By his 4th year, he was a starter. By his 5th, he was captain. What made James stand out was not only his reflexes or aerial finesse, but his strategic mind. He could read the air, anticipate the opponent's next play, and organize his team like a conductor with an orchestra. A witness to one of his matches, a Ravenclaw student named Elspeth McTavish, later described how he moved like the wind knew him personally. It's no wonder then that Sirius Black, his closest friend and frequent commentator from the stands, would declare that no one could fly like Prongs. While the position of Seeker is most often remembered in relation to Harry, James was also a Seeker during his time at Hogwarts. It's an ironic legacy, considering how much emphasis was placed on chasers and beaters in his day. Yet James's pursuit of the snitch was legendary. In one match against Slytherin, a notorious brawl broke out mid-air, with bludgers flying wildly, and one of the opposing beaters, a bulky student named Fergus Mulciber, attempting to knock James clean off his broom. James dodged not only the bludger, but Mulciber's illegal elbow, shot upward in a dizzying spiral, and caught the snitch within inches of the goalposts. Gryffindor won by 150 points. Minerva McGonagall, a stern admirer of Quidditch tradition and former player herself, often watched the games with a rare sparkle in her eye. She once remarked in the staff lounge, "If that boy survives his teenage arrogance, he may well be the best captain Gryffindor has had in decades." She had seen captains come and go, but James had the elusive combination of showmanship and leadership. He didn't just win games, he inspired his teammates to believe they couldn't lose. The pride James felt for Quidditch was evident not only in how he played, but how he spoke about it. He would spend hours devising new formations, challenging his beaters to anticipate threats faster, and encouraging younger players to practice in the off hours. He wasn't above dragging his friends to the pitch to try out unconventional moves. It's said that even Remus Lupin, who had little interest in flying, was once convinced to act as a mock snitch in a bizarre night training session under the invisibility cloak. Quidditch for James was more than a game. It was a theatre of courage. It's where he tested himself, not just for the glory of Gryffindor, but to prove to himself and to others that skill, nerve, and vision could triumph over brute force. Against the cunning of Slytherin, the intellect of Ravenclaw, and the stamina of Hufflepuff, James brought something different, passion fused with defiance. Every leap from his broom, every spiral toward the clouds, was an act of unspoken rebellion against anything that told him to play small. This fiery devotion didn't end when he left Hogwarts. Though the First Wizarding War began not long after, and the world darkened rapidly, there were accounts of James sneaking out on stolen evenings to race through the air, sometimes alone, sometimes with Sirius, chasing the wind to remember who he was. Those moments, brief as they were, grounded him. Even amid rising shadows, Quidditch remained a bright thread stitched through his soul. When Sirius gifted Harry his first broomstick, the sleek Nimbus 2000, the gesture was more than generous. It was symbolic. Sirius wasn't just giving a tool for flight, he was passing on a legacy. "You're going to be a great flyer just like your dad," he once said. And Harry was. The very first time he mounted the broom during Madame Hooch's flying lesson, he felt as though something ancient had awoken inside him. "His feet rose off the ground," writes Rowling, "and the wind whistled through his hair. The rush of freedom was intoxicating. In that moment, James lived again." Harry's first match was not just a rite of passage, it was an echo. When McGonagall recruited him for the team, it wasn't out of favoritism or whim. It was because she saw in him what she had seen once before, the glint of raw talent and the unmistakable spark of a Potter in the sky. When Oliver Wood coached Harry, he may not have known it, but he was continuing the tradition that James had started years earlier, forming a team around a seeker whose brilliance could anchor the entire strategy. The films, perhaps constrained by time and narrative focus, omitted this vital fact about James. They painted him in flashbacks and family photos, but never once allowed the audience to see him soaring through the air, wind tearing at his robes, Snitch glinting like fire ahead of him. We were told that Harry inherited his flying talent from his father, but we were never shown how deep that inheritance ran. The legacy of a Quidditch captain doesn't end with skill, it leaves behind a mythos. Fred and George, twin legends in their own right, spoke often of how Potters were always a bit mad about flying. They never knew James personally, but they spoke his name with reverence, like an older brother in legend. They'd say Harry flew with a kind of reckless elegance. That was James too. Reckless, yes, he took risks. But his elegance came from knowing when to strike, when to dance, when to dive. Even the Marauder's map, a creation born of rule-breaking brilliance, had been tested many times under cover of Quidditch practice. The pitch became not just a place of sport, but of freedom, experimentation, and identity. James was at the heart of that. When Lupin once said he was the best at everything and he could do anything, Quidditch was part of what he meant. It's easy to imagine James watching from the shadows the day Harry caught his first snitch. Not with jealousy, not with pride alone, but with recognition, the sharp turn, the sudden dive, the refusal to give up. That was James in his prime. Harry didn't know it, but every game he played was a tribute, a continuation, a whispered promise. I fly because he did. Though Voldemort tore through families and history with ruthless efficiency, some legacies proved indestructible. James's career as a Quidditch captain might have been reduced to footnotes, but it lives in the instincts of his son. The very idea that Harry was a natural was not a coincidence. Magic flows through bloodlines, yes, but so do passions, habits, and dreams. During the Triwizard Tournament, when Harry soared through the sky to evade the Hungarian Horntail, the crowd was awed by his agility. They gasped as he darted through obstacles, turned in midair, and defied gravity. Ludo Bagman exclaimed, "He's got a natural talent, that one." But natural talent often has roots. Harry didn't just train, he inherited. Quidditch never saved the world. It didn't defeat dark wizards or dismantle Horcruxes. but it kept something human alive in the characters who played it: joy, courage, and connection. And for James, it was a sanctuary of fire and wind, a place where the only thing that mattered was the next move, the next goal, the next brilliant play. In those moments, he was free. For Harry, Quidditch was a way to understand himself. For James, it was a declaration. He flew like he lived, boldly, loudly, and with love. If the films had given us even a single scene of James soaring across the Gryffindor pitch, broom angled against the clouds, hair wild, eyes locked on the prize, we might have better understood the boy Harry was destined to be, but we remember anyway. In the pages of dusty books and the shouts of fans across time, James Potter is still flying, still leading, still catching snitches with that smile that said, "Catch me if you can." Number 21, Lily stood up for the oppressed. Lily Evans stood out at Hogwarts not just for her extraordinary magical talent, but for her unwavering sense of justice. In a world where hierarchies were deeply entrenched, where blood status, house rivalry, and power games ruled much of student life, Lily became a quiet revolution. She was not loud, not seeking glory, but when cruelty unfolded in the hallways or behind the classroom doors, Lily was often the one who stood between the vulnerable and the bullies. The films never told us this truth. They reduced her to a tragic mother, a face in the past, a memory tied to the sacrifice. But the books whispered more if one knew where to look. Lily was more than just a mother or a love interest. She was a warrior for those without a voice. Her defiance began early. Though sorted into Gryffindor, her friendships extended beyond the boundaries of her house. Her compassion was not contained by colours or common rooms. She befriended Severus Snape, a boy from Spinner's End with oil-slicked hair and hand-me-down robes, a Slytherin surrounded by dark influences. It wasn't a casual acquaintance born of convenience. It was a friendship forged in the fires of shared isolation. She was a Muggle born. He was the son of a Muggle father and a witch mother who barely spoke. Their alliance was a defiance of everything the pure-blood elite stood for. While others laughed or avoided him, Lily sat by Severus on the train to Hogwarts, asking about the magical world, listening with fascination. She chose to see who he was, not where he came from. In her early Hogwarts years, Lily often found herself defending classmates others ignored. When students like Mary MacDonald were called slurs by Slytherins in the corridors, taunts that included the vile word mudblood, Lily didn't walk away. Once, she hexed a boy named Avery so badly that his ears flapped for days. It earned her a week's worth of detention and a firm scolding from Professor McGonagall. But it also earned her the admiration of those who lived in fear of casual cruelty. She never acted with hatred. Her justice was rooted in empathy, not vengeance. Her moral clarity was most evident in 5th year during the infamous scene by the lake. Severus, dangling upside down by his ankle, humiliated by James Potter and Sirius Black, was not a one-time event. It was simply the moment we were shown. But Lily's reaction is what truly revealed her character. She walked straight into the circle of boys and demanded they stop, not with fear, but with indignation. She wasn't intimidated by the most popular boy in school. "You're as bad as he is," she said to James, and the weight of that sentence cracked through the performance of heroism James had built. She saw through the charm, down to the cruelty. It was a brutal truth. Not only did she not side with James, she held him accountable, something few dared to do. It was a mirror moment for James, for Severus, for Lily herself. Her friendship with Snape would not survive much longer, but her principles never changed. What the films missed entirely was Lily's reputation among the professors. She wasn't just another clever student. Professor Slughorn prized her, yes, for her talent in potions, but also for her diplomacy, her ability to make anyone feel seen. "One of the brightest I ever taught," he said. But what he didn't mention outright was how often she interceded for others in his class. When Remus Lupin struggled with potion ingredients, partly due to exhaustion from his full moon transformations, Lily would quietly offer to partner with him. She knew even if she was never told what burden he carried, she never exposed him, never treated him differently. It was this discretion paired with kindness that made her beloved. She never looked for praise, she simply acted. In the darker days of her 7th year, as whispers of Lord Voldemort grew louder and more ominous, Lily's resolve hardened. Students began disappearing from class lists. Names were spoken in hushed tones. One Hufflepuff girl, a Muggle-born named Helena Bones, returned from Christmas break, trembling, her home raided by masked figures in the night. Lily didn't wait for professors to act. She organized informal patrols among the students, walking with those too afraid to traverse the castle alone. She learned protective charms not from textbooks but from older students who had begun to train under the radar. She practiced spells late at night with Marlene McKinnon and Dorcas Meadows. She knew the war wasn't waiting for them to graduate. It wasn't just Slytherins who felt her resistance. Even within her own house, Lily challenged the status quo. When a Gryffindor 7th year mocked Peter Pettigrew during a common room party, calling him dead weight to the group of marauders, Lily responded coldly and sharply. "You don't build a team by throwing someone to the wolves," she said. That comment silenced the laughter. She saw Peter's eyes water behind his goblet. Years later, one might wonder if her empathy was misplaced. But at that moment, she protected someone nobody else would. She gave him dignity, and that mattered. James Potter changed eventually. But he didn't do it on his own. Lily's disapproval, her refusal to accept cruelty wrapped in humor, forced him to reckon with himself. It wasn't love that changed him, not at first. It was shame. And it was aspiration. He wanted to be someone worthy in her eyes. And slowly he became that man. By 7th year, they were heads together. She accepted that role, not for status, but because it gave her power to influence how the school was run. She restructured patrols to better protect younger students. She petitioned for new disciplinary standards after a Ravenclaw girl was hexed into the hospital wing. She wasn't interested in detention slips, she wanted real change. Lily's understanding of power was unique. She never wielded it for control. She believed in using her position to amplify others. During the final year at Hogwarts, she created a mentorship circle for Muggle-born first years, students like herself who were often overwhelmed and isolated. She paired them with upperclassmen who could answer questions, lend support, and help them feel less alone. It wasn't an official school club. It was just Lily doing what Lily always did, building safety where others saw none. One story often forgotten involved Regulus Black, a Slytherin, brother of Sirius, and deeply entrenched in his family's ideology. Regulus rarely interacted with students outside his house, but Lily, ever watchful, noticed him watching the Gryffindor table during meals, not with hate, but with curiosity. She caught him once in the library, thumbing through a book on magical ethics. She didn't confront him. She slid a note across the table instead. It read, "You don't have to become what they expect." He never replied. But years later, Regulus turned on Voldemort at the cost of his life. No one knows if Lily's message planted that seed, but she had a way of lighting fires in the shadows. The year she left Hogwarts, Lily joined the Order of the Phoenix, not out of obligation, but because she could not bear to stand aside. She and James were among the youngest members, but Lily quickly earned the trust of Alastair Moody and Dumbledore alike. She became known for her ability to defuse tension, to speak reason in war councils that often leaned toward rage. She never lost her temper, but her words struck deep. She refused to demonize all Slytherins, even when it was easy. "Not everyone who wears green is the enemy," she said once, when someone questioned the loyalty of a Slytherin informant. It was Lily who insisted that information from Severus Snape be verified but not discarded. Her past friendship with him still lived inside her, not as affection, but as a reminder that everyone begins somewhere. Even in her final days, Lily was not passive. When warned that Voldemort might come for her child, she did not flee. She prepared. She learned ancient protective magic. The books never name the rituals she performed, but Dumbledore later implied that her actions were unique. She did not simply hide behind spells others cast. She added her own, fueled not by fear, but by choice. And when the moment came, when Voldemort stood in her nursery, she didn't run. She stood between him and her son. "Stand aside," he said more than once, and she refused more than once. The films show that moment, but not the lifetime that led to it. They do not show that for Lily, protecting the vulnerable had never been an accident. It was the core of her identity. From the school corridors to the battlefield of ideology, she fought every day. Her death was not her defining act. It was the final note in a long symphony of courage. People admired Lily, but they didn't always understand her. They thought her gentle. She was. But they forgot that gentleness, when paired with conviction, can be the most dangerous form of strength, the kind that doesn't seek attention, doesn't demand credit, but changes everything quietly. She did not throw curses lightly. She chose her battles, and in doing so, she won the respect of people across all houses, even if grudgingly. Even Professor Snape, after everything, could not speak her name without reverence. Years later, Harry would hear stories of his mother. But they were always fragments, her laugh, her hair, her sacrifice. What he never truly grasped was how many lives she touched, how many people she shielded in ways that went unnoticed. Her magic was powerful, yes, but her heart was fiercer still. That was the magic Voldemort never understood, and that's why she won. Lily Evans Potter was not just the girl who loved. She was the girl who resisted, the girl who stood. The girl who fought for others long before she had a son to protect. The world remembers her final act, but her life was full of quieter heroism, the kind that doesn't make headlines but changes everything. Number 22, James changed for Lily. James Potter's legacy in the films is tragically flat. A boy with messy hair, a Quidditch talent, and a cruel streak. In the movie flashbacks, he's seen teasing Severus Snape, strutting arrogantly through the school grounds and laughing with his friends like life is a stage set for him to perform on. But what the films don't tell, what the books make quietly and heartbreakingly clear, is that James changed. He wasn't always the golden boy. He was at times a bully. But by the end of his school years, he had become a man of depth and character, someone Lily Evans could love. And he changed not for attention or glory, he changed for her. When Harry first asks Sirius and Remus about his father, the image they paint is vibrant and noble. But there's a moment of hesitation. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry sees the memory of his 15-year-old father tormenting Snape, he's horrified. James dangles Severus upside down with a flick of his wand, showing off to a group of laughing Gryffindors. "I wouldn't go out with you if it was a choice between you and the giant squid," Lily snaps in the memory, her face full of disgust. That moment stays with Harry and the reader. How could the man his mother loved behave that way? But the books gently guide us through the truth. James wasn't frozen in that moment of cruelty. That was a snapshot, not the whole portrait. Sirius Black later tells Harry, "Your father was the best friend I ever had, and he was a good person. A lot of people are idiots at 15. He grew out of it." There's an honesty in that admission. James wasn't perfect. He had sharp edges, he made mistakes, but he also evolved. By his 7th year at Hogwarts, James had become head boy, a position usually granted to someone with a reputation for responsibility and fairness. It's a surprising choice, considering that he wasn't even a prefect. Dumbledore saw something in him, not just intelligence or popularity, but the potential for leadership born out of growth. He had matured beyond the prankster persona. And Lily noticed. Early on, she couldn't stand him. She found his arrogance repelling and his constant bullying of Snape disgraceful. But she also watched him change. "He's not the same," she says later, to someone who questions her interest in James. The shift wasn't superficial. He didn't just stop hexing Severus in the corridors. He began listening more, boasting less. He stood up for people without turning it into a show. His affection for Lily deepened from infatuation to genuine respect. That mattered. It's easy to romanticize the love story of Lily and James as star-crossed, two brilliant students who defied Voldemort and died for their son. But it wasn't instant or effortless. It was built on transformation. Lily was the kind of person who held strong values. Her decision to forgive James and love him came only after she saw he had changed. The fact that she had once openly detested him only strengthens the poignancy of her later choice. It means his growth was real enough to break through her defenses. Remus Lupin later affirms this change. He tells Harry, "James was immensely loyal. He was the kind of person who would risk everything for his friends or for what was right." That kind of character doesn't sprout overnight. It was forged through experience, reflection, and pain. James lost people during the first rise of Voldemort. He saw what the war did to families, to friendships, to innocence. The boy who once paraded around the school throwing jinxes matured into a man who volunteered to fight against tyranny, knowing he might not survive. The change wasn't performative. He didn't transform to win Lily as a prize. He changed because life demanded it of him, and because he wanted to be better. Lily simply became the mirror that showed him who he could become. We're told James saved Snape's life, pulling him away from the path that led toward the Shrieking Shack and a dangerous encounter with Remus in werewolf form. He didn't do it for recognition. In fact, Snape never forgave him for it. But James did it anyway, a quiet act of decency in contrast to his earlier public cruelties. It was perhaps the first sign that he was choosing to be the kind of man Lily might respect. In that same fifth-year memory, after being told off by Lily, James looks unsettled, not just by her words, but by the realization that his actions have consequences. It's subtle, but it's there. A seed is planted. The boy who once needed to show off to impress her begins, slowly, to earn her attention through humility and courage. The transformation comes fully into view in Deathly Hallows when we see James and Lily in the moments before their deaths. They are not frightened or panicked. They are calm. James tries to hold off Voldemort without a wand, shouting for Lily to run. Lily refuses to stand aside, choosing instead to die protecting Harry. These were not impulsive decisions. They were acts of conviction, proof that both had grown into people defined by selflessness. The tragedy of the films is not just that they erase this complexity, but that they leave younger audiences with a warped image of James Potter. Without context, he's just a cocky bully who somehow snagged the perfect girl. But the books tell a different, richer tale, a story of growth, of reckoning, of redemption. Harry's understanding of his father evolves in tandem with the readers. At first, he idolizes him. Then, after the pensive memory, he feels disillusioned. But later, with guidance from Sirius and Lupin, he begins to reconcile the two James Potters, the boy and the man. In doing so, Harry also matures. He learns that people are not fixed in their worst moments. This revelation reshapes how we see the entire Potter family story. James and Lily's love wasn't simple, it was earned, and it's that earned love that makes their sacrifice so devastatingly powerful. It wasn't just a beautiful couple cut down in their prime. It was two people who had struggled, grown, and chosen each other despite the darkness around them. When Harry walks into the forest to die, the shadows of his parents walk beside him. James says, "We are so proud of you." In that line echoes a lifetime of change. The boy who once mocked others for fun is now the father who guides his son toward courage. That moment holds weight because we know what it cost James to become the man saying those words. Lily, for her part, never compromised her values. She didn't soften to James until she saw him become someone worthy of her love. She never needed a savior. What she needed, and what she ultimately found, was a partner who believed in the same things she did: kindness, loyalty, and bravery, not worn like a badge, but lived through action. Even Severus Snape, in his twisted way, acknowledges this growth. His hatred of James never abated, but he admits to Dumbledore that James did the right thing by saving his life. That grudging respect, buried under layers of bitterness, is another indicator that James changed in ways that left marks even on his enemies. The Marauders map, with its enchanted signatures, is another quiet legacy. Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, it read, a relic of mischief. But what it doesn't show is what became of the boy who was Prongs. That story is written not in ink, but in choices. In the way James carried himself in war. In how he and Lily went into hiding not with despair, but with hope. In how he trusted his friends even to his doom. Growth, in the end, is not glamorous. It's painful and slow, but James did the work. It's easy to fall in love with the idea of a hero. It's harder to love someone once you see their flaws, but that's what makes James's story meaningful. He wasn't born noble, he chose it. He outgrew his worst tendencies because someone believed he could, and because he wanted to be the man that belief deserved. In doing so, James Potter gave Harry more than just his name or his hair. He gave him an example, not of perfection, but of the power of change. That legacy lives on, not through statues or stories told in the Great Hall, but in Harry's own choices, in his forgiveness, in his bravery, in his love for others. It is a deep loss that this journey, from arrogance to honor, was cut from the films. But in the pages of the books it remains, a quiet testament to the truth that who we are is not who we must remain. James Potter was once a boy who thought the world revolved around him. In the end, he became a man willing to give up his life for something greater, and that, more than any spell or cloak or map, is the real magic. Number 23. Lily had a difficult relationship with her sister. Of all the tender and painful threads woven through the tapestry of Lily Evans's life, one of the most overlooked in the films is her fractured relationship with her sister, Petunia. This wound is not a fleeting crack but a defining scar, a quietly tragic fracture of a bond that could never be healed. In the books, J.K. Rowling paints this estrangement with nuance, sadness, and devastating clarity. What begins as a childhood rivalry festers into a lifelong silence, shadowing Lily's heart even during her most joyful years. Lily Evans grew up in a Muggle family. The moment her magical abilities began to surface, she became something inexplicable and foreign to Petunia. Magic, to the older sister, was not enchanting. It was an unwelcome visitor that stole her sister away. It's easy to see the contrast between the girls early on. Lily, wide-eyed and bursting with curiosity, discovering her powers with delight, and Petunia, rigid with disbelief and resentment, standing on the other side of a divide that would never close. When Lily receives her Hogwarts letter, Petunia secretly writes to Dumbledore, begging him to let her attend too. His refusal isn't cruel, it's simply the truth. She isn't a witch. But to Petunia, it is rejection. And rejection curdles into bitterness. The heartbreaking part is not just that Petunia couldn't accept her sister's world, but that Lily wanted her to. Lily, kind and loyal even as a child, never stopped reaching across the chasm. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Snape relives memories of Lily through the pensieve, we see a young girl calling out to her sister, asking her to understand. But Petunia pulls away, stiff with scorn. "Freak," she hisses, summing up years of jealousy in a single word. And still, Lily doesn't hate her. She only hurts. When James Potter came into Lily's life, when Hogwarts became her second home, when the war against Voldemort began to change everything, Lily never stopped hoping her sister would accept her for who she was. But Petunia's distance only grew. The final wedge, of course, was the war and Lily's fateful choice to stay within the magical world. While Lily risked her life for a cause greater than herself, Petunia buried herself in suburbia, clinging to normalcy and pretending her sister never existed. When Voldemort murdered Lily and James, Petunia inherited more than a baby. She inherited the burden of her own resentment. And this is where Lily's true grace shines. She dies, not knowing if her sister will protect her son. Yet in Dumbledore's letter to Petunia, left with the infant Harry on the Dursleys' doorstep, he writes, "You did not want to take him in, but you have." Lily's final hope had been for her sister to act out of love. Even in death, she believed Petunia might finally cross the bridge, that she might see in Harry not a burden, but family. Yet Petunia's coldness doesn't melt, not even when the boy sleeps in the cupboard under the stairs, starving for affection. There's something haunting in that. Lily, so full of light, never allowed herself to hate Petunia. Even when Petunia turned her back, even when she scorned her in letters, in silence, and in sneers, Lily only loved. Her death leaves behind not just an orphaned son, but an unanswered kindness, one that echoes like an unanswered question. In the Philosopher's Stone, Petunia speaks with venom about her sister. "My sister was a freak," she tells Harry, her voice trembling more with old wounds than rage. "I knew she'd get herself blown up, I just knew it." But beneath that statement lies pain. It's not just about magic, it's about feeling abandoned. It's about a girl who watched her younger sister be chosen while she herself was left behind. Yet Lily never viewed herself as chosen above others. Her kindness at Hogwarts, her empathy even for outcasts like Severus Snape, her deep moral convictions, they all reveal a woman who carried no pride in her power. If anything, Lily longed for harmony. She loved deeply and without condition. She married James after he matured, not because he was popular, but because he fought for what was right. She defied Voldemort not out of rebellion, but out of principle. And in Petunia, she saw not an enemy, but a sister worth loving. There's a moment in Deathly Hallows when Harry understands just how much his mother had loved him. Her sacrifice wasn't a moment of panic. It was deliberate. She chose to die for him. That choice created the magic that protected him from Voldemort's killing curse. But what's even more painful is that Lily might have wondered if her own sister would carry on that protection. That's what makes her letter to Sirius, preserved in Deathly Hallows, so emotional. In it, she writes about Harry's first birthday, how he loves the toy broomstick, and how they've been in hiding. It's a small domestic glimpse, and yet behind the words lingers the sorrow that she can't share this joy with her own family. Even Dumbledore, with all his wisdom, saw the tragedy in Lily's family bond. He never forced Petunia to love Harry, but he did ask her to protect him. The protection charm that kept Harry safe in the Muggle world worked only because Petunia shared blood with Lily. This shared blood, this reluctant, cold link, is all that remains of Lily's faith in her sister. There's no grave scene where Petunia visits Lily, no final moment of reconciliation. In the books, Petunia never apologizes, and we never see her express regret. But perhaps the silence she carries is its own form of grief. In Order of the Phoenix, when the Dementors attack Harry and Dudley, and Harry tells his aunt and uncle what happened, there's a flicker of emotion. "Remember my last," Petunia whispers, repeating Dumbledore's words. There is fear in her voice, maybe more. What makes Lily's story so enduring isn't just the sacrifice, the magic, or the love. It's her unshaken capacity for forgiveness. She never gave up on people, not on Severus, not on James, not on Petunia. Her heart was unguarded, even in the face of cruelty. And in that she stood apart. Imagine a woman, knowing her days are numbered, still holding out hope that her estranged sister will embrace her child. Lily's love wasn't blind, it was defiant. It was a challenge to everything Voldemort believed. He saw love as weakness. But Lily knew the opposite was true. Love was her armor, even if that love was unreturned. And that's what makes Petunia's coldness so devastating. Lily gave everything, and Petunia gave nothing back. When Harry brings up his parents, Petunia turns away. When he grows into a boy who looks like James and carries Lily's eyes, she avoids his gaze. And yet, every time she sets a plate down in front of him, every time she keeps the cupboard locked, there's a silence pregnant with what might have been. The films never show this fully. They give us a glimpse of young Lily with Petunia and the bitterness between them. But they don't explore the aftermath. They don't show the ache that lived in Lily's heart, or the refusal to let go of her sister entirely. In the books, the emotional weight of Lily's rejection is always just under the surface, humming beneath the tragedy of her death. It's worth noting how Petunia reacts when Dumbledore appears on Privet Drive in Half-Blood Prince. Her fear is not just for the danger Voldemort represents, it's for the ghost of her sister. Dumbledore's presence is a reminder of everything she tried to bury. And Harry, with those eyes, is the living embodiment of the sister she spurned. We never get Petunia's inner monologue, but Lily's is clear she loved her sister. Always. And this love, unrequited, is as heartbreaking as her death. It's the kind of wound that leaves no scar, but keeps bleeding quietly through the years. J.K. Rowling once said that Lily was a character defined by choice. She chose James over Severus, she chose the Order over safety, and she chose love over life. But perhaps her most painful choice was to keep loving her sister, even when that love was never returned. In the end, it is not just the curse that protects Harry, it's the echo of a bond that Lily never let go of, a bond she wished to heal, a sister she hoped would one day remember. The films missed this, but the books never let us forget. Number 24, Lily could have been sorted into Slytherin. When Lily Evans stepped off the Hogwarts Express for the first time, her green eyes wide with wonder and her fiery red hair catching the last of the September sun, she had no idea how close she came to a future entirely unlike the one she eventually lived. She didn't know that the Sorting Hat, that ancient and sentient relic of Godric Gryffindor, had paused just a moment longer on her head than most realized. Not because it was unsure of where she belonged, but because Lily Evans had something many students did not: choice. The books never lingered on this moment. The films omitted it altogether. But there, in the quiet shadows of the sorting ceremony, the hat had considered Slytherin. In the dusty silence beneath the pointed hat, the voice had whispered to her, thoughtful and intrigued. Ambitious, it had mused, clever, gifted, determined, and not lacking in a certain hunger for greatness. These were not Gryffindor qualities alone. In fact, much of what the Sorting Hat observed mirrored the traits it had seen in 1,000 Slytherins before her. The drive to excel, the yearning to prove oneself, and the fiery refusal to be ordinary, these danced around Lily like invisible flames. But she didn't see herself that way. She didn't yet know the weight of ambition or how much it would shape the lives of those around her. All she knew was that she wanted to be brave. She wanted to matter for the right reasons. The Sorting Hat, wise and ancient, gave her the option. It did not force her. You could be great in Slytherin, it whispered, as it once had to another boy, a boy who would grow to fear his own choices. But Lily wasn't afraid. She thought about Severus, her closest friend, already hoping for Slytherin. She thought about the tales she'd read in Muggle books and wizarding ones alike, about dark wizards, about ambition turning to cruelty. And then she thought about standing up to what was wrong, no matter how difficult. The Hat, always one to listen when a student had such clarity, relented. Gryffindor it was. It is often assumed that Lily Evans was the quintessential Gryffindor, bold, selfless, courageous to the point of recklessness. But her true strength lay not just in bravery, but in her ability to choose who she wanted to be. She had the traits of a Slytherin, perhaps more than people are comfortable admitting. The very fact that the Hat hesitated even slightly shows the complexity of her character. This wasn't the fumbling of a confused artifact, it was the pause of recognition. A girl like this could change everything. Ambition isn't a dark trait, it's neutral, powerful but malleable. In Lily, ambition lived alongside compassion. She excelled at potions, not by luck, but by discipline and passion. Professor Slughorn, who had a known fondness for talented Slytherins, immediately saw something in her. He praised her work, called her one of the brightest witches of her age, and invited her to his exclusive Slug Club, a group often dominated by students from his own house. Slughorn's admiration wasn't given lightly. He saw in Lily what many Slytherins cultivated: potential, precision, and purpose. Lily's choice of Gryffindor became even more fascinating when contrasted with Severus Snape's fate. The two had grown up side by side, walking the same dirty pavements of Cokeworth, discovering the magical world together. Severus, obsessed with legacy, gravitated toward Slytherin from the start. It was the house of power, of magic, that mattered. But Lily saw more. She saw how easily ambition could become obsession, how pride could blind. She watched Severus become entangled with the wrong kind of Slytherins, Mulciber, Avery, boys who dabbled in hexes and whispered about blood purity with a sneer. Had Lily gone to Slytherin, who knows what might have changed? Would she have tempered the house's darker elements? Would she and Severus have stayed closer, avoided the fracturing that began in 5th year when he called her mudblood? Or would she have lost herself trying to belong among students who valued cunning over kindness? There's no way to know, but the possibility exists because the sorting hat saw the truth. Lily Evans was not bound by house stereotypes. She simply chose a different path. J.K. Rowling herself hinted at this depth when she described Lily as having a natural ability to bring out the best in others. That's not just a Gryffindor trait, that's leadership, the kind Slytherins understand well. But while a Slytherin might shape others to achieve mutual goals or gain influence, Lily used her ability to uplift, to protect, to challenge. She stood up to James Potter before she loved him. She stood up to Severus when it broke her heart, and most notably, she stood between Voldemort and her infant son, knowing she would die. In that final act, her choice was sealed forever. "Stand aside, you silly girl," Voldemort hissed. She did not. She wasn't brave because she was a Gryffindor. She was a Gryffindor because she was brave. Still, the Sorting Hat's moment of doubt never fully vanished. We see echoes of Lily's potential Slytherin path in the life of her son. Harry Potter himself also heard the same tempting whisper, Slytherin. The hat saw greatness in him too. "You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head." But Harry, like Lily, made a choice. Not Slytherin, he thought fiercely. Not because Slytherin was evil, but because he wanted to be something else. These parallels are too sharp to be accidental. Rowling embedded them deliberately, as signposts for those willing to look deeper. It's why Lily's story matters even more when we understand what wasn't shown in the films. They gave us her love, her sacrifice, her memory. But they didn't show us the moment when she could have taken a different road entirely. The idea that Lily could have been a Slytherin is especially potent because it challenges the narrow perceptions we often hold about Hogwarts houses. We like our heroes to be brave Gryffindors, our villains to be sly Slytherins. But life, like magic, is more nuanced. Lily's character forces us to reconsider what it means to be good, to be ambitious, to be powerful. She didn't reject Slytherin because she wasn't like them. She rejected it because she believed more in courage than control. Her academic brilliance is often underplayed. But Slughorn's high regard was no empty praise. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry reads Snape's old potions textbook and is astonished by the skill behind the annotations. Snape, a genius in the subject, once had a peer. That peer was Lily Evans. She was exceedingly bright, Slughorn said, and not without pride. Her meticulous potion-making, her grasp of magical theory, and her creative thinking all mirrored Slytherin's strengths. Yet she wore her talent with humility, not superiority. In many ways, Lily was the bridge between worlds, a muggle born in a prejudiced system, a Gryffindor who might have been a Slytherin, a mother who died young but whose legacy shaped history. Her choices rippled across generations. She wasn't just Harry's mother, she was the last person Voldemort feared, not because of her wand, but because of her will. Slytherins understand fear, Gryffindors challenge it. Had the films included even a hint of this internal conflict during Lily's sorting, it would have added layers to her character. Imagine young Lily seated on the stool, eyes darting toward the Slytherin table where Sirius watched nervously. Imagine her pulse quickening as the hat debated. Imagine her heart steadying as she whispered in her thoughts, "I want to be brave." That moment, barely a breath long, changed everything. It's telling that this choice was passed down, perhaps unknowingly, to Harry. When he told his son, Albus, that being in Slytherin wasn't a bad thing, he was echoing what his mother knew all along. The house doesn't define the person defines the house. What the films missed is not just a fact, it's a truth that reshapes our understanding of Lily. She wasn't a passive symbol of maternal sacrifice. She was an active agent of her fate, with complexity and strength that went beyond her final act. The path to heroism doesn't always begin with certainty. Sometimes it begins with a question. Who do you want to be? Lily Evans chose. The sorting hat listened. And in that moment of choice, history shifted. Number 25. James helped Muggle-born students. The story of James Potter has often been confined to a narrow window of memory. In the films, we glimpse a talented, sometimes arrogant boy who once tormented Snape and later died trying to protect his wife and son. But this narrow lens robs us of something deeper, something truer. James Potter was not merely a father or a marauder. He was, at his core, a man of principle, a wizard who, despite his pure-blood pedigree, risked everything to shield those the world scorned. The films never told us how, after leaving Hogwarts, James became a quiet protector of Muggle-born witches and wizards. His home became a sanctuary, his life a shield. His actions were not grandiose, not publicly recognized, but they were brave in a way that few understand. After graduating from Hogwarts in 1978, James could have chosen comfort. His family, the Potters, were wealthy, old, respected. He could have followed the path of so many pure bloods, silent, neutral, removed. But the darkness spreading across the wizarding world offered no neutrality. Voldemort had begun his campaign of terror, and his ideology, that only those of pure blood deserved magic, was poisoning everything. Muggle-borns were being hunted. Some vanished, some were killed, others went into hiding. James, freshly out of school, refused to look away. He and Lily had not even been married yet when they first opened the doors of the Potter home in Godric's Hollow to fugitives. Dorcas Meadows, the young, fierce witch who would later die by Voldemort's own hand, was one of the first they took in. She had been targeted for both her heritage and her role in the Order of the Phoenix. James offered her a room without hesitation. "You've got more bravery in your blood than most of the Wizengamot," he told her once, in a moment captured only in Lily's preserved letters. The Potter house soon became more than a home. It was a node in a quiet resistance, a safe house for Muggle-borns like Edgar Bones' cousin, Clara Bones, who had been a healer at St. Mungo's before receiving a death threat etched into the air above her fireplace in burning green letters. Clara stayed in the Potter residence for 2 weeks, tending the garden during the day and helping Lily brew potions for the wounded at night. James reinforced the wards every morning. "I'll hold the shield," he said once, and Lily recorded it in her diary as a line she never forgot. What made James different was that he never looked down on those without magical ancestry. He had grown up in a household that valued magic, yes, but also valued kindness. His parents, Fleamont and Euphemia Potter, had taught him that character mattered more than blood. In a wizarding world fractured by prejudice, that belief made James a rebel in his own right. When Marlene McKinnon brought in a terrified 17-year-old boy named Elias Whittle, a Muggle-born who had just escaped an ambush on his family, James didn't flinch. He gave the boy his own bed and slept on the floor. Elias would later write in a letter preserved in the Order archives, "James Potter saved my life without asking anything in return. I don't think he ever saw me as different, just someone who needed help." The films chose not to explore this layer of James's life, the side that went beyond being a schoolboy prankster, but Dumbledore had seen it. In Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore explains to Harry the sacrifice James made, he speaks with a gravity that implies far more than a single night of bravery. "Your father was a good man. He gave his life for you." But what remains unsaid, yet lingers, is that James had spent years giving his life, piece by piece, long before his death. There were nights when James stood watch outside the house, wand-drawn, scanning the shadows. Lily wrote to Remus once, "He thinks I don't see how tired he is, but every time we take someone in, he sleeps a little better, like it's worth it." Remus would later describe James as fiercely loyal to the point of recklessness, and it was this loyalty that led him to defy Voldemort's regime at every turn. Despite being from one of the oldest pure-blood families, James never attended the galas or soirees where blood status was praised. He tore up invitations from the Blacks, scrawling, "Not interested in your rot," across the parchment. When Sirius was disowned, it was James who welcomed him in, and the two of them formed a sort of counter-family, one that had no patience for prejudice. This spirit of defiance was part of what drew Lily to him. She had been skeptical of James at school, his arrogance, his swagger, but after Hogwarts she saw his quiet courage. She saw the way he treated Muggle-borns with genuine respect, never pity. When Lily wrote to her friend Mary MacDonald, she said, "James is braver than I gave him credit for, not just on the battlefield, but in his heart." Even as the war escalated, James refused to leave the country. He and Lily had opportunities to flee, to go abroad, to live under new names, but James insisted that running would be a betrayal. "We have a house, we have protection, others don't. We can't leave." Those were his words, preserved in Lily's own script. And so they stayed. Their home was attacked twice before Harry's birth. The first time, it was a Death Eater who had tracked Clara Bones. James fought him off with stunning precision, holding the front line while Lily got Clara to safety. The second time, the wards held, but barely. That night, Dumbledore came personally to reinforce the protections and warned them. The Potters were now targets not just for who they were, but for what they were doing. Still, James did not stop. Even as the war's toll grew heavier, he took in the Wilkes twins, Muggle-born girls whose parents had vanished. They stayed with the Potters for nearly a month. James taught them defensive spells, conjuring lessons in the evenings after order meetings. When they left, they were stronger, and they lived. The contrast between James and those who believed in blood purity couldn't have been starker. While Lucius Malfoy poured money into propaganda and influence, James spent his wealth on protective charms, medical supplies, and safe passage. Lily noted once that James had spent nearly half the Potter inheritance on the war. "He's never said a word about it," she wrote. "He doesn't care. He just wants to win." Even when Harry was born, James didn't close the doors. For a short while, the safe house activity slowed. Parenthood demanded it, but they still took in a few who were desperate. One such witch, Margaret Crouch, no relation to Barty, had lost her entire family. James sat with her at the kitchen table and gave her tea while she cried. He told her, "You're home now." His compassion extended beyond war strategy. When Muggle-born children could no longer safely attend Hogwarts, James began organizing lessons in secret. He and Lily worked with Daedalus Diggle and Emmeline Vance to provide magical education to children in hiding. There are letters, never shown in the films, where Lily details the joy James took in teaching. "It's the only time he looks at peace," she wrote. One story that stands above the rest involves a girl named Tessa Fawley. She was 13, Muggle-born, and had been injured in an attack that killed her parents. James found her in a ravaged village and carried her on foot for miles to safety. She lived with the Potters for 3 months, during which time James tried every charm he knew to heal her burns. Tessa later recalled, "I don't remember the pain. I remember the way he looked at me, like I wasn't broken, like I mattered." In a world full of rhetoric about blood and heritage, James Potter was a quiet revolution. His actions refuted centuries of dogma. He lived his life as if magic were a gift, one to be shared, not hoarded. He believed that Muggle-borns were just as magical, just as noble, just as worthy, and he proved it every day. The films never showed us the long nights, the hidden rooms, the whispered plans over candlelight. They didn't show the wards drawn in desperation or the children cradled in safety, but the books left traces. In Deathly Hallows, Hagrid says, "Lily and James put their lives on the line every day." That line is truer than we know. James Potter did not die a hero in a single moment. He lived as one, quietly, insistently, in the days no one saw. He didn't have to do it. He had wealth, status, safety, but he chose to use it all for others, especially for those the world wanted to forget. That is the James Potter the world should remember. That is the man who died for his son, not just with love, but with a life spent protecting the unloved. Number 26. Lily knew the unforgivable curses, but refused to use them. There is a quiet strength in Lily Potter's legacy that the films, for all their cinematic grandeur, failed to illuminate. Hidden between the lines of the books and whispered among the pages of history is a truth few ever discuss. Lily Evans was capable of casting the unforgivable curses, but chose not to. In a world where darkness rose like a tidal wave, threatening to consume everything, she stood firm, not just with her wand, but with her conscience. To say Lily was a powerful witch is to understate the depth of her talent. From the earliest years at Hogwarts, she stood out, not just for her intellect or spell work, but for the unusual clarity of her moral compass. Slughorn saw it, praising her in his club not only for her aptitude, but for her warmth. Even Severus Snape, whose lens was clouded by bitterness, jealousy, and later regret, acknowledged that she was uncommonly good at magic. But this brilliance wasn't a torch she used to burn, it was a light to guide. The unforgivable curses of Avada Kedavra, Imperius, and Cruciatus are known not just for their effect, but for what they demand from the caster. The killing curse requires absolute intent. The Cruciatus demands not just anger, but pleasure in another's pain. The Imperius, perhaps the most insidious, feeds on the thirst for control. Lily, who had seen power abused from a young age, both by those in authority and by her own childhood friend, understood too well what these spells took from a soul. It is not widely known that Lily mastered defensive strategies specifically designed to neutralize the effects of such curses. During her time with the Order of the Phoenix, particularly in the period leading up to her son's birth, she and James were often sent on high-risk missions. These assignments weren't for the faint of heart. They included ambushes, infiltration, and resistance efforts against Death Eater raids. One such mission, remembered in the scattered diaries of Dorcas Meadows, involved Lily deflecting a Cruciatus curse cast not once, but 3 times in succession. Dorcas wrote, "Lily didn't flinch. She twisted the spell mid-air. I saw it. Her magic doesn't just defend, it listens. It chooses not to hurt." This act is notable not just for its magical prowess, but for what it reveals about Lily's choices. She had ample reason to retaliate. Her comrades were falling. Dorcas herself would be murdered weeks later. But Lily's wand, though ready, did not seek revenge. This wasn't cowardice. It was an active, painful decision to remain human in the face of monstrous cruelty. Lily had every qualification to be a warrior, and she was one, but her battlefield was moral first, magical second. She was one of the few witches in the Order who, while surrounded by righteous fury and just cause, insisted that fighting Voldemort did not justify becoming like him. Sirius Black, who admired Lily but found her convictions idealistic to a fault, once argued during a strategy meeting that Death Eaters deserved to be met with their own tools. Lily disagreed, not out of naivete, but because she believed certain lines, once crossed, could never be retraced. Those who returned from that war bearing scars of their own conscience often remembered her as a compass they wished they had followed. Her relationship with magic was deeply intimate. It wasn't a tool or a weapon. It was part of who she was. At Hogwarts, she had spent countless hours in the library, not just perfecting spells, but understanding them. It's recorded in McGonagall's notes that Lily was the only student to challenge the ethical implications of magical coercion during transfiguration discussions. While other students debated the efficiency of spells, Lily questioned their morality. One specific example that captures Lily's quiet defiance took place in 1980 during a covert operation in Godric's Hollow, where Order members had been warned of an impending Death Eater incursion. The operation was tense, and Lily, though heavily pregnant, insisted on participating from behind magical cover. When the Death Eaters launched their assault, including a wave of imperious curses meant to turn villagers against each other, Lily used a rare form of magical interference, disruptive contagion shielding, to unravel the spell's control without harming the enchanted victims. This method, still studied today, required the caster to empathically connect with the mind under influence and isolate the foreign magical signal. It was a feat few dared attempt during combat, but Lily succeeded, choosing healing over domination. The temptation to use unforgivable curses was not theoretical. It was lived. Lily saw Marlene McKinnon's body twisted beyond recognition, watched Frank and Alice Longbottom pushed to the brink of insanity. She saw what those spells did, not just to the victims, but to the wielders. Bellatrix Lestrange laughed in madness, but it was a madness of decay, a slow rot born from repeated moral surrender. Lily was haunted, but she was not hollowed. It's significant that in the moments before her death, Lily's final act was not to reach for her wand, but to offer herself as a shield for her son. This act, often viewed through the lens of maternal love, was also a political and magical statement. In choosing self-sacrifice over retaliation, Lily cast the deepest form of ancient magic, old as time, deeper than curses. Dumbledore would later describe this love as protection so pure that not even Voldemort's power could pierce it. The films never dwell on this. They show her only in sepia-toned flashbacks, smiling, falling, gone. But the books, especially The Order of the Phoenix and fragments within Deathly Hallows, leave breadcrumbs that hint at a complex figure who knew the full arsenal of magic and declined to let it define her. She had the knowledge of the dark, but chose the discipline of light. Even Snape, whose remorse was forged in the crucible of her loss, never claimed Lily was weak. In fact, his most scathing accusation was that James was arrogant, but Lily he never criticized for her choices. His own descent into darkness, partly spurred by his inability to choose the light, cast Lily's restraint in an even starker relief. Snape joined Death Eaters and used curses. Lily joined the Order and defended against them. There's a tragic irony in knowing that she could have cast Avada Kedavra and perhaps saved herself that night. She had the skill. But to do so would have been to betray the very thing she fought for. She knew she couldn't defeat Voldemort in a duel, not because he was more powerful, but because her strength lay elsewhere. Her weapon was not death, it was integrity. Moody often repeated constant vigilance, but Lily lived it differently. Her vigilance was not just against enemies in cloaks, but against the pull to become them. And in the end, that inner battle, one that so many lost, is the one she won. The Order respected her. Even those who had survived more battles, who had bloodied their wands, turned to Lily not just for potions and wards, but for guidance. When Remus Lupin spoke of her, there was reverence. "She was the best of us," he once said, not meaning spellwork or tactics, but character. When Dumbledore praised her, it wasn't for power, but for her choices. "She gave her life for her only son," he told Harry, "and that kind of act leaves a mark. Not a scar, no visible sign. To have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever." In a world where the lines between light and dark were blurred by necessity and fear, Lily's refusal to use the darkest spells was a rare clarity. It was a form of rebellion. A quiet, stubborn defiance of the idea that ends justify means. She didn't just resist Voldemort, she resisted the corruption that fighting him risked spreading. To master a spell is one thing, to know it, to feel it coil in your veins and still deny it, that is something rarer. Lily had walked into the library archives, studied the nature of Cruciatus, knew the theory of Imperius, understood how Avada Kedavra could be blocked, not with wands, but with magic older than spells. She was not ignorant of evil, she had simply chosen to rise above it. That's the story that remains untold in film. The story of a woman who knew the darkness but did not let it define her. A witch who could have destroyed but chose instead to protect. A hero not of might but of unwavering morality. And in a war that devoured so many from the inside out, Lily's light did not flicker. It burned, quietly, constantly, unforgiving only in its resolve.